Hello and welcome to part 9 of History Boffin's South Africa playlist. We're wrapping up our 3-video study of the segregation era with a look at how the political scene in South Africa developed in this period. Whites dominated politics in the country, and the political divisions were therefore mainly between pro-British sentiment and Afrikaner nationalism. World War II brought these differences into sharp focus and led many Afrikaners to believe that their very way of life was under threat. This period was dominated by 3 political heavyweights, while a 4th was to become more influential in the 1930s. Louis Botha, Jan Smuts and James Barry Munnig Hertzog were all veteran officers of the South Africa War, but their attitudes towards their former enemy and now colonial master were markedly different. Daniel Malan was not a war veteran, but had risen to prominence as the editor of Die Burger, an Afrikaans language pro-Afrikaner paper. Botha was elected the first Prime Minister of the Union of South Africa, with Smuts as his deputy. Their politics was influenced by 2 aims. Firstly, to work closely with the mining industry, the most lucrative industry in the country. Secondly, to accept South Africa's place in the British Empire and not cause friction with Britain through nationalistic rhetoric and action. While this allowed their political party, the South Africa Party, to initially build a broad coalition of support from both British and Afrikaner whites, over time the support they received from Afrikaners diminished. This allowed James Hertzog, a member of Botha's cabinet despite many disagreements, to resign from the government and party and create the National Party, whose agenda was pro-Afrikaner. Furthermore, the decision to fight alongside Britain in World War I was politically costly. An Afrikaner rebellion in the former republics was ruthlessly put down, and while Smuts went on to a successful wartime career, becoming part of the war cabinet and playing a part in post-war peace settlements, he was viewed as a traitor to Afrikaner interests. This left Botha's government more and more dependent on British votes. In 1919, Smuts succeeded Botha after his death due to an attack of Spanish influenza, and it was now his allegiance to mining interests further diminished Afrikaner support for the South Africa Party. In 1922, he sent military planes and tanks to help suppress the Witwatersrand uprising, a serious strike-turned-rebellion by miners. With 153 dead and 4 leaders executed, it helped seal the National Party's rapid rise in support at the expense of the South Africa Party. In the 1924 election, Hertzog came to power. Hertzog focused far more on white, especially Afrikaner interests. Many of the segregation-era laws, which are outlined in Video 7, were enacted when he was in power. Hertzog also wanted to achieve greater autonomy for South Africa, and his efforts helped lead to the 1931 Statute of Westminster and the later Status of the Union Act, which gave more and more power and independence to Britain's dominions. The 1929 Wall Street crash and subsequent Great Depression led to greatly reduced trade, made worse by Herzog's stubborn refusal to move South Africa off the gold standard to aid exports. Significant political changes took place in an effort to address the economic shock. By 1933, a coalition government was in place, with Hertzog as Prime Minister and Smuts as his deputy. In 1935, the National Party and South Africa Party came together as the United Party. A more hardline group of Afrikaner nationalists, spearheaded by Daniel Malan, in turn created the Purified National Party. While the United Party dominated the 1938 elections, gaining over 4 times as many seats as the Purified National Party, the growing threat to world peace and South Africa's recently found autonomy meant one question dominated South African politics in 1938 and 1939. If war broke out, would South Africa join Britain or remain neutral? The war demonstrated the fundamental division within white politics to date, that of British versus Afrikaner sentiments. Smuts felt strongly that South Africa should join Britain and fight German aggression, and for obvious reasons British South Africans did too. While Herzog led a significant political and grassroots group of Afrikaners that argued for neutrality during the war, surprisingly, many Afrikaners signed up to fight for the country, and over half the military strength of South Africa during the war was made up of Afrikaners. Even so, the debate split the United Party in two, with Herzog resigning and many politicians moving across to the National Party. There was also a smaller group of Afrikaners who felt that if fighting alongside anyone, it should be the Germans. There were ethnic and ideological reasons for this. Many Afrikaners descended from German stock, and the Nazi theory of racial stratification, with whites at the top, appealed to some. The most significant group in this category was the Ossewa Brandwag, the Oxwagon Sentinel. It had close links with the National Party, and its members included past, present and future politicians, including the future Prime Minister B.J. Vorster. They refused to join the military, harassed servicemen and turned to sabotage. The government responded by imprisoning thousands of its members during the war, while in 1942 Daniel Malan ordered the National Party to sever links with the Ossewa Brandwag, whose tactics were becoming too extreme. In fact, Malan's position on the war was somewhat obscure. He certainly argued against participation in the war alongside Britain, and there was enough speculation about his role and sentiments to see a national inquiry launched soon after the war. But Malan differed from the Ossewa Brandwag in that he wanted to pursue constitutional methods to achieve power and was unwilling to work with lawbreakers. South Africa not only contributed men to the war, but materials, and in the case of specific industries such as steel, coal and clothing, production levels rose significantly during the war years. This led to significant urbanisation within South Africa, and critically 1/4 of blacks lived in towns and cities by the end of the war, outnumbering whites. The government responded to increased cost of living due to the war and drought by protecting poor whites, but the lack of help for blacks led them to unionise in hope of obtaining wage increases. Despite the Industrial Conciliation Act banning black membership of unions and prohibiting strike action, during the war years and just after, South Africa witnessed far more militancy from black workers. The most significant example of this was in the summer of 1946, when a 4-day strike in the gold mining industry took place. The strike was aimed at improving pay and conditions and involved about 75,000 men. The government reacted brutally and broke up the strike with 12 dead and hundreds injured. However, the war increased pressure on the government to relax segregation. After all, South Africa was fighting with the Allies, who consistently pushed anti-racist propaganda. Therefore, there were a few concessions made. In 1942, the pass laws were relaxed. There were small pensions made available for blacks, and wages in some industries did increase at a rate higher for blacks than for whites. To many whites, it looked like segregation was slowly being dismantled, and the blacks were posing an increased threat to their way of life. This feeling gained a name, Swart Gevaar, or Black Peril, and was used to indicate how many whites felt by the mid-1940s. I hope you've enjoyed this overview of the political scene in the segregation era and South Africa's role in World War II. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe by pressing the red subscribe button below.